by it, the people of old received their commendation. By faith, we understand that the universe was created by the Word of God, so that what is seen was not made out of things that are visible. So faith, we can say real quickly, is the foundation on which man's relationship with God stands. There is no other foundation on which our relationship with God stands but faith. Faith is that foundation. In fact, Hebrews 11 and verse 6, let's jump ahead just for a minute. And he would say, without faith, it is impossible to please Him, to please God, for whoever would draw near to God must believe that He exists and that He rewards those who seek Him. So he says, listen, you've got to have faith. Without faith, we say, well, you got to be baptized. I understand that. But how many people are baptized that don't have faith? You got to have faith. Faith brings you to a relationship with Jesus. I'm not saying faith alone, but without faith, you're not doing anything. Okay? And faith is the foundation. And everything accomplished by these individuals, and many that he makes reference to, but he doesn't get into detail toward the end of the chapter, they accomplished these things by faith. Look at verse 32 and following. Now, I'm going to go back a little bit in just a minute, but verse 32, and this is just to say, he's listed so many that we're familiar with, and then he says, and what more shall I say? For time would fail me to tell of Gideon, Barak, Samson, Jephthah, of David and Samuel and the prophets, who through faith conquered kingdoms, enforced justice, obtained promises, stopped the mouths of lions. Remember that story? Quenched the power of fire, escaped the edge of the sword, were made strong out of weakness, became mighty in war, put foreign armies to flight. So all of these people, I didn't even mention these folks, and they accomplished all these things through faith. So that's what this chapter is about. Faith is the foundation. Our hope is based upon our faith. It's because we have faith that we believe we have hope. Does that make sense? I mean, without faith, you have no hope. But because we have faith, we have hope that it doesn't end here for us. Okay? So, God commends the people of old, he says, because of their faith and their trust in God. Their faith in things not yet seen led them to give practical demonstrations in their lives that they believed. What does that mean? That means this. We're going to be able to see their faith by what they accomplished. You know, and that's a question you and I have to ponder. You know, can people tell who we are? Can people tell that we're men and women of faith? You say, well, how could they tell unless I explain that to them? They ought to be able to tell by the way we live. They ought to be able to tell by the way we conduct ourselves, by the way we treat other people, by how we interact with people in good times and bad, all of that stuff. They should see our faith. Since the righteous shall live by faith, Habakkuk 2, and that's coming from the tail end of Hebrews 10, it is clearly implied that those mentioned in this chapter were justified people. Okay? They were justified people by faith. They were in good standing with God. So I'm going to kind of move through this. We'll make some comments as we go. Feel free to make comments. This is very redundant. It's a great chapter. Okay, as it talks about faith, everything accomplished, these people accomplished, they did it by faith. There was a relationship with God, okay? So, verse 4, by faith, Abel, we remember the story, offered to God a more acceptable sacrifice than Cain, through which he was commended as righteous, God commending him by accepting his gifts, and through his faith, though he died, he still speaks. Why do we talk about Abel today? Why is he mentioned here? Because of his faith. His faith. He offers this sacrifice to God. The visible evidence of Abel's faith was the altar and its sacrifice. Okay? The unseen element, obviously, of Abel's faith was God. Verse 5. By faith, and this is maybe one of my favorite ones, by faith Enoch was taken up so that he should not see death. He was not found because God had taken him. Now, before he was taken, he was commended as having pleased God. And if you go back and look at that story in the Old Testament, Enoch walked with God. And you think, well, what does that mean? Well, it means fellowship or relationship, but he understood how God walked. He understood what would be, what a pleasing walk would be to God, and that's how Enoch lived. And so he didn't face death of any kind. God just took him to be with him. And I just think that's the coolest thing. And if that doesn't build your faith, I mean, God just took him. He just went to be with God. He was pleasing to God. Thoughts, comments? Yeah.
Abel. Romans 10 says faith comes from spirit.
Yeah.
So you think God said, here's what I want. Abel complied, and Cain didn't.
Cain didn't. Yeah, I think that's a good point. Yeah. Absolutely. Verse 6, we've already looked at it. Without faith, it's impossible to please him, for whoever would draw near to God must believe that he exists, that he rewards those who seek him. Faith is our foundation. If we don't have faith, we won't have anything. Okay? I mean, it doesn't matter what your title is. It doesn't matter where you live. It doesn't matter who you know. It doesn't matter anything if you do not have faith. Because if you don't have faith, it doesn't matter how good your character is. It doesn't matter that you pay your bills and your taxes and all those other good things and you're a good citizen of our country. If you don't have faith, you cannot please God. And I think we've got to grasp that. We've got to understand that. And that's not, and this goes without saying, I don't even think I need to say this, but that's not at all pushing the envelope to say faith alone is what saves us. That's not what it's saying. But you're never going to be saved without faith. I mean, why were you baptized? Because, I'll tell you why I was. Because I believe Jesus died on the cross, and I needed to contact his blood and obey the gospel to contact his blood to be baptized, to be saved. But why did all that happen that Tuesday night? Because I believed. That's it. Now, if I hadn't believed, if I didn't have faith, there never would have been a baptism that night. Boy, what a wreck my life would have been, right? So, faith is that foundation. We see that. So let's talk a little bit about Noah, verse 7 and following. By faith, Noah, being warned by God concerning events yet unseen, rain, a flood, that meant nothing to them then, in reverent fear, constructed an ark for the saving of his household. By this he condemned the world and became an heir of the righteousness that comes by faith. So, and this is a great story in Genesis, and many of you have visited the ark, and we did 2 summers ago, I think it was, and I enjoyed going through it. It was cool to go through it, but my favorite part was just standing back and looking at it. It's so big. And I've read the measurements, I've taught about it for years, but until I saw that, I thought, that's amazing, you know. But he does this. He spends some 120 years around about building this ark because he believed what God said. God said, flood's coming. You need to build an ark. You need to get your family on the ark. I'm paraphrasing here. Gonna rain. A lot, yeah, right? And he believed God. He believed God, and so he builds. And think of all those years he's building this huge boat, and he's ridiculed by his peers. You know, people were thinking, man, what are you doing? What is this, some kind of carnival thing? I mean, what are you doing? And he faced this ridicule, but because of his faith, he continued preaching, and his preaching was building the ark. That was his preaching. Because every piece of wood or whatever utensil he used to build this ark, he's proclaiming a faith in God. That's the only reason he built it. He believed in God. He believed what God said. He accomplished this. Yeah. Man, that would be discouraging. Yeah, preach 120 years with no converts. Yeah, nobody walked the aisle, not one time. Yeah, exactly. So the outcome of his faith, he became an heir of righteousness that comes by faith. This relationship with God, this closeness with God. Was Noah perfect? I don't even want to go down this rabbit hole too long. None of these people are perfect. None of these people are perfect, and that's what continues to give me hope, and I hope it does you as well. So what does faith do to a man or a woman? It will lead him or her to offer sacrifices to God. That's what Abel did, knowing that he deserves to be worshiped. We're not offering animal sacrifices, as we've said for so many chapters already, this quarter and the one before. But we're offering worship to God. Why do you come and offer worship to God? And you say, because I have faith, and he deserves it. He should be worshiped, right? Exactly why Abel offered the sacrifice. Faith will lead a man to walk in moral standards of God. That's what Enoch did. Faith will lead a man maybe to change his profession. Build an ark. That's what Noah did. And these people accomplished what they accomplished because of their faith. You know, as we go through this, I hope it strengthens your faith, but I hope you see just the practical side of how important faith is in our lives. And understand that there are people who live today without faith, and they just don't see that it's necessary at all. It's just not a big deal to them. All right, got to move on. 8 and following, talk a little bit about Abraham. So by faith, Abraham, I like this one too a lot. By faith, Abraham, when he was called to go out to a place that he was to receive as an inheritance, you say, well, that's kind of neat. Yeah, but listen, he went out not knowing where he was going. He uproots his family. He moves to a place he'd never been, didn't know where he was going, didn't know what the neighborhoods were like, the schools were like, none of that stuff. I mean, that's what we would do. I remember when we came and interviewed, and we're riding around on a Saturday afternoon with Bill and Linda. I'm like, what about the schools? What about the population? One question after, what about the neighborhood? All these questions. Man, I wouldn't move here or anywhere else without first going and checking it out. You know why? Because my wife wouldn't let us, right? Right? But God calls Abraham, and this speaks of the faith Abraham has. He doesn't know where he's going. He just goes. He went out not knowing where he was going. Verse 9, by faith he went to live in the land of promise, as in a foreign land, living in tents. So he's not even in a house. He's living in a tent. So he's really not laying roots down. Living in tents with Isaac and Jacob, heirs with him of the same promise. For he was looking forward to the city that has foundations, whose designer and builder is God. Not interested in laying down the roots here, because I want to lay roots down in heaven, right? So, but he does this by faith. We're thinking, who moves to a new city? Who moves to a new area and doesn't first make a trip? Missionaries don't do that. They make several trips to check out the area and see how receptive the people are and find out what the cost of living is. Nobody does that. Abraham did, because God called him to, and he had that kind of faith. I think that's amazing. What verse am I in? Thanks. So, I like this one too. 11, by faith Sarah herself received power to conceive, even when she was past the age. What does that mean? Man, she was too old to have babies. What is going on? Sarah herself received power to conceive, even when she was past the age, since she considered him faithful who had promised. Therefore, from one man, and him as good as dead, because he was so old, from one man, and him as good as dead, were born descendants as many as the stars of heaven. Can you count them? As many and as immeasurable the grains of the sand of the seashore. Have you ever tried to count the sand on the seashore? You just can't. So Abraham's 100. Do you remember how old Sarah was? She was 90 and has a baby. Why? Because God said it's going to happen. And they believed it. And it happened. And God's going to bring about this whole race through them. The results of their faith, descendants as numerous as the stars in the sky, as countless as the sands on the seashore. Incredible. Incredible. Look at verse 17. I'm going to kind of have to move a little bit. By faith, Abraham, when he was tested. Let's see what kind of faith Abraham has. Well, he went to a foreign land without going and checking it out first. Well, we just read of how he believed God would give him a child at 100. By faith, Abraham, verse 17, when he was tested, he offered up Isaac. Isaac's his son, the son of the promise, right? And he who had received the promises was in the act of offering up his only son, of whom it was said, Isaac shall your offspring be named. He, Abraham, believed that God was able even to raise him up from the dead, from which, figuratively speaking, he did receive him back. From Genesis, is it 21 or 22? Abraham, is commanded to go offer his son Isaac as a burnt offering, right? And so he goes to the mountains and he prepares to kill his son, ties him up, puts him on the altar. He rears back with the knife. He's going to kill his son. He's going to offer him as a burnt offering thing. And he's going to do it. He would have done it because God commanded him to do it. And he was going to do this believing, already knowing that it's going to be through my son that these descendants are going to come. So God's apparently going to raise him back, bring him back to life. And so he knew that God could do that too. But obviously he was stopped. It was a test to see Abraham's faith and obedience, and obviously he passed the test. Would you do that? Would you pass that kind of test? That's tough. That's tough. Thoughts, comments?
What I find interesting is when that chapter of Genesis begins with Abraham taking Isaac up there, first sentence is something along those, so stop where God decided to test Abraham.
Yeah.
He pushed his faith to the next level.
Yeah.
It takes one level of faith to go from, how you know everything to where you don't.
Yeah.
It takes another level to offer your own child.
Yeah. Isn't that something? Isn't that something? And that's exactly, he tests him, but he takes him to a whole nother level of faith. You know, if Abraham's sitting at the cafe the morning before talking to the guys and they're talking about offering their son, what are you thinking he's going to say? Man, I'd never do that. You know, there's no way. But he did. I mean, God took him to the next level, his faith. I like how you put that. I think that's exactly right. Yeah, something we definitely should not miss. Oh, yeah, go ahead.
It's not really a question.
Okay.
Me and my dad were talking about this a few days ago, about how in there, God says he will offer his own sacrifice when a goat appears, but it also shares resemblance to the sacrifice of Jesus.
Absolutely does. Absolutely. It is a mirror of that. Exactly right. Because what Abraham was called to do, God later did. That's exactly right.
Well, something that
Good
story
point.
doesn't address but makes me wonder, talks about how old Abraham was when Sarah conceived.
Uh-huh.
And it never says how old Isaac is when he sacrifices him, but apparently
Yeah.
he's a younger man. Does that say anything about maybe Isaac's faith also?
Yeah. And
That he allowed this to happen? Because he could have overtaken his dad at any time, I think.
Probably. I don't think he was a little boy. I think he was probably an older teenager is what I think. 17 to 20, but probably could have. You're exactly right. And you're exactly right. Does it say how old? So, but it does. We speak a lot about Abraham's faith, but it also, Isaac asked, hey, we've got everything we need. We've got the supplies, but where's the burnt offering? Where's the animal for the sacrifice? And what did Abraham say? Yeah, God will provide. And he did. He did. And so, what does Isaac do? He just goes on and trusts him. So, yeah, you're exactly right. That's a good point. Very good point. All right. Verse 20. By faith, Isaac invoked future blessings on Jacob and Esau. By faith, I'm just going to read a little bit, guys. By faith, Jacob, when dying, he blessed each of the sons of Joseph, his grandchildren, bowing in worship over the head of his staff. You remember that happening? That was in Egypt. By faith, Joseph, at the end of his life, made mention of the exodus of the Israelites and gave directions concerning his bones. These are stories that you remember from the Genesis account. Verse 23. By faith, Moses, I like this one too. By faith, Moses, when he was born, was hidden for 3 months. Why did his parents hide him? Who hides their baby? Yep, they were going to kill all the boy babies born to the Jews, weren't they? Because they grow up to be warriors. Yes, sir.
2 years old or under.
Yeah. So they hide him until they can't hide him anymore. And we know the story. Pharaoh's daughter takes him in, right? So by faith, verse 23, Moses, when he was born, was hidden for 3 months by his parents because they saw that the child was beautiful. What parents would see that their baby is anything but beautiful? And they were not afraid of the king's edict. We made mention of that. By faith, Moses, when he was grown up, think of how he was raised in Pharaoh's house and think of what he had access to. Anything he wanted. His father, so to speak, was the king whom he was raised by. So by faith, verse 24, Moses, when he was grown up, refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter, choosing rather to be mistreated with the people of God than to enjoy the fleeting pleasures of sin. He considered the reproach of Christ greater wealth than the treasures of Egypt, for he was looking to the reward. He's thinking about the eternal reward and not just the temporary pleasures. I think that's a lesson in and of itself. I think it's so easy to get caught up in the temporary pleasures of the flesh. I think we all there at times. And here's a prime example of someone that had all the wealth and anything he wanted at his fingertips. But as he grows up, he realizes this is not what it's about, and this is not who I am and who I want to be and how I'm going to live. And he turns his back on the things of the world to live out a life of faith. I think that's pretty amazing. Verse 27 just says, by faith he left Egypt, not being afraid of the anger of the king, for he endured as seeing him who is invisible. By faith he kept the Passover, sprinkled the blood, so that the destroyer of the firstborn might not touch them. Remember the blood on the door frames, right? Had to be blood. And when the destroyer angel of death, however you want to phrase it, sees the blood, what happens? Just passes on by. And that becomes known as the Passover. And so in 1 Corinthians 5, Jesus is referred to as our Passover lamb. Why? Why is he referred to as our Passover lamb? Because we contact his blood when we're baptized, and God just passes over judgment of us. We talked last week or the week, I think it was last week, about how he doesn't remember our sins. Why? Because of our Passover lamb. That's why. It's hard to wrap our minds around that, but I believe it to be true, guys. All right. Let's see. Yeah. I knew I had a question here, though, so I saw verse 29. I remember I had a question. I wanted to find it. Okay, by faith the people crossed the Red Sea. Remember this? As on dry land. We remember that miracle. But the Egyptians, they're following in pursuit of the Israelites, attempted to do the same, were drowned. Now, let's talk about this for a minute. You remember that, the Exodus, right? Going through the Red Sea, the Israelites have no trouble. The water's parted. Israelites go through as on dry ground. Here come the Egyptians. They pursue them. So what Pharaoh wanted them to do, changed his mind yet again. So they pursue them. Water crashes in. They drown. Here's my trivia question. And I don't know that it's really a trivia question, but here's the question just for fun. Did Pharaoh die in the Red Sea with them? Where did it say he did, though? Maybe that's more of a trivia question, because it doesn't say that in the Exodus account, but I will tell you he did die. He most certainly did. Let's look at this together, can we? Psalm 136. Because many will say, no, Pharaoh didn't die. It doesn't say that he died. In the Exodus account, it doesn't say that Pharaoh died. But Psalm 136, just for fun, starting in verse 10, to him who struck down the firstborn of Egypt, for his steadfast love endures forever, and brought Israel out from among them, for his steadfast love endures forever. With a strong hand and an outstretched arm, his steadfast love endures forever. To him who divided the Red Sea, so what we're talking about, in two, for his steadfast love endures forever, and made Israel pass through in the midst of it, for his steadfast love endures forever, but overthrew Pharaoh and his host in the Red Sea, his steadfast love endures forever. So just a little trivia question. I don't think the Exodus count really tells us for sure that Pharaoh died, but Pharaoh did die in the Red Sea. Just a fun thing. Probably knew that. Verse 30, by faith, the walls of Jericho fell down after they had been encircled for 7 days. Remember the story of Joshua. All these things by faith. I mean, these are the heroes of faith. Here's the Hall of Fame, if you will. Right? Verse 31, by faith, Rahab the prostitute did not perish with those who were disobedient, because she had given a friendly welcome to the spies. You know, the only problem I have with this verse is the word prostitute. So people of faith are not always well polished. God uses, and I really don't have a problem with that, I said that for emphasis' sake. God uses a prostitute to accomplish his plan. Man, do we sell him short today. Used a prostitute. She had faith. And mentioned in the heroes of faith. Who would have thought a prostitute would have made the Hall of Fame of faith? He was, yeah, he was. And David will be mentioned. David was a murderer and an adulterer. So gives us a little bit of hope.
And she's in the Messianic lineage.
Say it again. And she's in the Messianic lineage, yes. Exactly, yeah, thank you for mentioning that. That's a biggie. Exactly. But not all people of faith are well polished. And here's the thing. You know, there's a lesson in that. A lot of times we view people by how they dress, what they look like, what they do, where they're from, and we cast our own opinions or judgments or whatever you want to call it. And then I look at this and I think, well, here's a prostitute. I mean, she's called a prostitute. We don't have to read between the lines. That's what Scripture says. That's what she was known for. But then became known for her faith in helping to accomplish God's purpose. And yes, in the Messianic lineage as well. I think that's pretty fantastic. And it's a lesson for us today. You know, it's not, and I wear a coat and tie on Sunday because my wife makes me, but it's not necessarily how we're dressed. It's not necessarily how well-groomed we are. You know, it's more about, yeah, you're pointing at your heart. It's more about our heart, right, and our relationship, our faith, our relationship with God.
Were any of the heroes of faith not one of them were perfect?
That's right.
They all were unpolished.
Yeah, yeah, that's a good point.
Every one of them.
Yeah.
Gideon was a coward.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's right. Very unpolished. And you know what? We are too today. I mean, even you say, well, I've been a Christian for 30 years or 40 years or whatever. Yeah, we're still rough around the edges. We're still a bit unpolished. I mean, come on, don't take too much credit, right? But the good news in that is there's evidence and proof that God uses unpolished people of faith to accomplish His will. And that's what should comfort us and give us hope and purpose. Give us purpose. All right, we read this earlier. We'll read through it again, make a few comments, and wrap up. Told you we're going to finish. Verse 32, and what more shall I say? He goes through, and I wish he had time to elaborate on all these, but he just couldn't. For time would fail me to tell of Gideon, you just mentioned him, Barak, Samson, you remember the story of Samson in Judges, love Samson, Jephthah of David. David's one of my favorite characters. And have you seen David in Branson? You like that? Man, wasn't that fantastic? Anyway, I could go on about that. I love that show. Of David, of Samuel and the prophets who through faith, he brings faith to light again, who through faith conquered kingdoms. This is what they did, enforced justice and so on. All of these things, stopped the mouths of lions. How in the world are the mouths of lions stopped? Boy, Todd, wouldn't you like to ask that to Daniel? He would point to God though. Quenched the power of fire, escaped the edge of the sword, were made strong out of weakness. And we could spend some time talking about that. And with that in mind, made strong out of weakness, drop back here to 2 Corinthians 12. Let's look at this just for the fun of it real fast. There's this vision Paul has. And let's see where I want to start. Yeah, let's just start in verse 3, and I'm not going to read it all, but we'll read a little bit of it. He says, and I know that this man was caught up into paradise, be the third heaven, where God is. Whether in the body or out of the body, I'm not sure. I don't know. God knows. And he heard things that cannot be told. And he's talking about himself, which man may not utter. On behalf of this man, I will boast, but on my own behalf, I will not boast except of my weaknesses. Though if I should, I wish to boast, I would not be a fool, for I would be speaking the truth. Let's drop down. Verse 7, so to keep me from becoming conceited, that'd be easy to become conceited, to go up to heaven and come back and tell that story. You can get a little puffed up about that. So to keep me from becoming conceited because of the surpassing greatness of the revelations, a thorn was given to me in the flesh, a messenger of Satan to harass me, to keep me from becoming conceited. 3 times I pleaded with the Lord about this, that it should leave me. But he said to me, my grace is sufficient for you. Listen to this. For my power is made perfect in your weakness. So when I go back in verse 34 of Hebrews 11, quenched the power of fire, escaped the edge of the sword, were made strong out of weakness. I think about the 2 Corinthians 12 story. When we are weak, that's when we're strong through Him. It's when we think we got it together and we think we're strong enough to handle what's coming our way, that's really when we're weak. Because when we think we've got it together and we think we've got enough and we think we're smart enough and we're strong enough and all of those things, we're thinking about ourselves and our eyes are on us.
That's what happened to Samson.
Well, yeah, exactly. That's a good point. What happened to Samson? But when we realize our weakness, we realize where our strength comes from, and it comes from the Lord. Okay, that's all free. Verse 35. Women receive back their dead. He's just going on by resurrection, talking about all these things that happened because of faith. Some were tortured, refusing to accept release so that they might rise again to a better life. Others suffered mocking and flogging and even chains and imprisonment. They were stoned. They were sawn in two. This is terrible. They were killed with the sword. They went about in skins of sheep and goats, destitute, afflicted, mistreated, of whom the world was not worthy, wandering about in deserts and mountains and in dens and caves of the earth. And all these, though commended through their faith, did not receive what was promised, since God had provided something better for us, that apart from us they should not be made perfect. So all of this, faith is victorious even in the face of apparent defeat. We think, man, life can't get any worse. This is it. I can't handle anymore. Faith says there is no defeat. Doesn't matter what this life brings. Doesn't matter what we go through. You can't take our faith away. And faith says, I'm victorious. Yes. Oh, yeah, agreeing. Yes. Say it again.
Out of all of those that had the faith,
Yeah.
they were my favorite because they were just regular people like
Yeah.
us. They were prophets or
Yep.
anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
These are things that regular people went through.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel what they, what they went through just because, even though we're not being persecuted like that,
Yeah.
but that's real touching to me.
It is.
Saying that the world, I mean, is not worthy.
Yep, that's right. And they went through what they went through because they were people of faith. And they did not give away. They did not throw their faith away. They didn't give up. Yeah, I love that. This city will last throughout eternity. Faith is the dynamic of successful living here, and it's the key to eternal life in heaven. Faith must be demonstrated, for true faith acts. And when faith acts, God's will is accomplished. Yes, ma'am.
Listen back at Moses. The first 20 years, he was with the Egyptians
Mm-hmm.
for a reason. For 20 years, God was preparing him. The next 20 years, he was a keeper of sheep,
Yeah.
where he learned to
Yeah.
herd them and guide them. And God was preparing him all along
Mm-hmm.
for what he had planned.
Yeah.
And we can look back in our lives and see, okay, God has prepared me for something else and then something else.
Yeah.
All his life, God was preparing him for that mission.
Yeah. That's exactly right. Such a good comment. And isn't it amazing that God takes him away from the king to teach him how to be a leader? I mean, that's incredible. But yes, I think it's a powerful thing to look back over your life and go, I remember when I was there and now I'm here. And I'm here because of what God has done and how God has worked and how God has matured me through faith. So that's a cool thing for sure. Thoughts, comments? Fabulous. All right, we have 2 weeks left. We'll do chapter 12, at least part of it next week, and then we'll fit. Chapter 13 is really easy, just some closing remarks he'll make, and then we'll be done. We'll be done. So we're getting close. Thanks so much. I appreciate you guys hanging in here for 6 months with me. I know it's been a long course. All right, thanks.